Good day, everyone. This is Hanney, critical faculty, and today I think we're going to have one of the funnest chats I'm going to have on this channel. A person very close to my brain, not to my heart, because the heart cannot think. Please welcome Neal. Hello, Neal. How are you?
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
Great to have you, folks. Neal has got a channel called Gnostic Informant, and Neal, can you tell us a little bit about it and tell us what are your contents around?
Yeah, so I started the channel last summer, early July, maybe sometime in July, and it was basically my leaving the faith of Christianity and going into the world of skepticism, critical scholarship, comparative religion, history studies, and you reaching out to different scholars in different fields, science, history, all the different areas, archaeology, philosophy, and trying to just get the truth, pure truth, without any bias, with no, agenda at all. Just what is the truth? What is true? And that's what the whole goal of the Gnostic Informant is to find that. And the word Gnostic Informant, it sounds like, oh, what is he, a Gnostic? Is he some sort of theist? Well, I was a Gnostic when I left Christianity. I dabbled in the Gnosticism because I thought it was interesting. There's this worldview of trying to have salvation through knowledge, and it reminded me of a more useful path for someone who is still a believer in a deity. So I sort of went into deism, Gnosticism, deism slash whatever, and then I found finally said, you know what? I don't know if, and I'm going to tell on my old self when an informant tells on their old self. So I'm the Gnostic informant telling on my Gnostic self. This is all nonsense. Here's the truth. We don't know the truth. There's a lot of things we don't know. We don't know what happens when we die. We don't know what happened before the Big Bang. We have to be honest about those things. But we know a lot of stuff. And let's be honest about that too. Let's get into that stuff. So I do what you do. I have on people like what's different scientists, different scholars, and we ask them questions and go from there and have good conversations.
The thing about Gnosticism, it's knowledge attained through different means. Like when you look at epistemology, and epistemology is trying to find out what is the best way we can attain knowledge, and knowledge that is not distorted by the poorly evolved brains and the filters of our senses.
Right.
But Gnosticism is a kind of knowledge attained through, is it sort of the purity of heart and reflection and spirituality rather?
Yeah, it's sort of like an intuitive divine knowledge of the heavens, of metaphysical reality, basically. So yeah, and it comes from the Greek philosophers like Plato and Aristotle and Pythagoras. They all wrote about gnosis. This is a big concept going around. Like the logos was a big concept being tossed around in the Greek world. These are all things that made its way into the Hellenized world and then into the world that got into the church. So this is all, big concepts that got into Christianity.
Yeah, and this worldview will only work with a Platonic philosophy, the idealism. A priori, there is knowledge that exists outside of our comprehension, and
Right.
we're only discovering that. But there comes the rationalist and the empiricist later on to tell you, starting from Aristotle, disagreeing with his teacher, to say,
Or,
well, no, knowledge is attained through experience. It's right here.
yeah, or Epicurus, if you can go back even farther.
Yeah.
There was sort of the two opposing worldviews in Greek philosophy was the Epicurean and the Platonic worldview. And the Platonists were wrong. I think it's pretty obvious. Platonists are wrong. The world's not forms; it's atoms, and atoms and void. The Epicureans proposed that this universe was made of atom, not made, but this universe consists of atoms and void. And while the Platonists thought that it was all forms, different types of forms and sizes and shapes, and it turns out the Epicureans were the closest to being right. They pretty much got it down. I mean, they didn't know everything, but knew as much as they could possibly know at that time period, way ahead of their time, way ahead of their time. They were, I mean, just think about how ahead of their time to be for to theorize atomic theory, basically, in the language that they had with the knowledge that they had at the time. So yeah, that's what happened, I think.
Well, we got our first super chat for today. It's quite an interesting one because it looks like it's to do with some Spanish drink, usually served in Spanish, sangria. Is that something you're familiar with?
Nah, not really, but I've heard of it. It sounds like sounds good. I support it.
Well, my understanding, John. So I thought he asked you that question because you sort of had a bit of a banter beforehand, or you kind of knew about it. But I think it was in uh, kind of 10 years ago. There was a law that's been trying to be passing, serving a mix of alcohol and wine in clubs. It's a Spanish drink. Sangria comes from the Latin or the Spanish sangre, means blood,
Right.
and the sangre real in the code, Da Vinci Code, the royal blood,
Yeah.
sang real in French. And it's quite an interesting question.
That's a good
But
question.
would you mix your alcohol? Would you mix your wine and alcohol? That'd be weird.
Would that be like? Could that be like a Eucharist thing? Like, like the blood, the wine.
Well, there might be a reference to that actually. Yeah, there could the humans are very strange, stitching up Frankenstein of ideas to come up with something really weird.
Right.
We're very good that way.
Yeah.
um, right. So continuing on the conversation. So you've left after how long you stayed in Gnosticism, you reckon?
Very, very briefly. It was sort of a step down from fundamentalist dogmatic Christianity into anything outside of it. I think that was like just a natural way to like descend out of it, if that makes sense. It's hard for people to just jump from being a fundamentalist anything to just completely out of it. It takes some steps. And I think that was my personal step out of it, was like, okay, let's look at the Old Testament God. He sends she bears after some little kids because they picked on Elijah. And then as I'm studying Christianity and the origins of Christianity, I find out about this guy named Marcion. This guy named Marcion in the second century, he's talking about the God of the Old Testament is really the demiurge, which is the word for creator in Greek mythology. Plato talks about the demiurge as the creator. So he's talking about the creator, the demiurge, being evil, and we need to be saved from the demiurge into the pleroma. I was like, wow, that makes a lot of sense. I like that because I don't stand for all that nonsense in the Old Testament. I'm done with that stuff. So I'm going to be better than that. I'm going to be a Gnostic now. And I'm going to make myself like, hey, look, I'm above the demiurge. So it sounds silly now, but at the time it made sense.
Yeah.
It's just a way to escape. You know what I mean? It was like my way out.
A further elaboration from John Geyer explains what the banter was all about. So
I was wondering if
this
that was what it was.
sangria Sharia, so it kind of rhymes.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Sharia law. Yeah, of course I support it. No, I'm just kidding.
uh, so it's quite interesting that people sort of leaving the religion is one of the most difficult things to leave for sure, and you kind of transition into a more comfortable platform before you cannot just leave immediately. So it's almost impossible or very difficult. Myself, I've gone through maybe kind of a spiritual 1 year trying to sort of sober myself up for the reality of things. So how long ago was that, Neil?
I'm leaving Christianity.
Yeah.
So I started to doubt probably a little over 2 years ago. I probably was out of the church, you know, I would say about a year and a half ago.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would say another year, another half a year probably before I was finally, yeah, that would make sense. So about a year ago is when I was finally, I guess you would call by definition atheist. So it's been about a year, which is not a long time for a lot of people watching this are probably like, wow, he's fresh. Yes, I am fresh to this new worldview. And yes, by definition, atheist is what you would say. It doesn't mean that I don't think that something else, that there could be something else. It's just that based on the evidence that we have, all of the religions that exist today, I don't think any of them are true. So I don't think any of the gods that we've come up with as an extension of our own creative understanding of what God would be, Zeus, Allah, Jesus, Yahweh, no, none of them exist. Those are just reflections of our own self that we put onto an idea and call it God.
Mm-hmm. And it shows. It does show for sure. But you're very similar to me. Then you're at least atheist of all the previous gods, and especially the Abrahamic gods.
Yeah.
Or gods, because I think they're different. All three of them. They claim to be the same, but I think they're different. There are stark differences in there. But there might be. You think it might be a possibility for something like the God of Spinoza, who is not a god anyway.
Oh, I'm very open to the deism argument. I know a lot of atheists just don't get it. Like they're just like, well, we have quantum fields that can create big bangs, and there's understandings that you don't need a mind. Basically, I get that too, but I'm also, it wouldn't surprise me if there was some grand mind, not like a theist, like it cares about what you do and you have to do this, that, and the third. No, it's just some sort of force. I guess I wouldn't be surprised, but I'm not going to sit there and be like, that has to be true. To me, I just don't know. I don't have any answer to that.
One of the issues we've created with the creation of God is we presumed him to be everything, omnibenevolent, and all these extreme abilities that sort of led to contradiction. But if that mind wasn't, I'm not going to say evil, let's say indifferent, then the problem of evil would be solved because he kind of doesn't care too much.
Right.
What do you think?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. It's like, if this thing cared about our actions and it was mingling in our affairs, we would know that. This would be pretty apparent by now. And if it is doing that, it's doing a terrible job. Terrible job. I mean, we live in a universe, in a world where energy has to eat other energy to survive. That's a bad design. That does not look like a designer. That looks like some sort of mistake or some sort of weird thing that just a sequence of events. And now I have to go eat an animal so that I can have nutrients so that I can live. I got to eat plants. The sun has to give energy. It's all these weird processes that have to happen. It does not look like someone designed it that way. If someone is going to design it, it should be a lot more better than.
Well, it seems like suffering is within the design.
Yeah.
So there is suffering, and if you eat on the flesh of a living thing for no failure of yours, you need energy, and if you don't have energy, you'll die yourself. Right. So you are determined. So it's almost like suffering is inbuilt in the system, and that can either it cannot come from a benevolent God. It has to be from either an evil God, an indifferent God, a God that doesn't have a mind. It's an impersonal God. It's the laws of nature and forces of natural selection and pressures and stuff like that, which is what we think it is the case so far. But if there is an entity, it has to be either evil or at least indifferent.
Yeah.
Would he then want to have a relationship with us?
Doesn't look like it. Like I've said, I told this to one of my friends who is a Christian. He's a Christian, and I didn't go out my way to say this to him. It was actually the other way around. He was actually evangelizing to me, and he was just trying to throwing Bible verses at me, and whatever. And then eventually, I said to him, "Listen, think about this. Your God tells you that all I have to do is believe in him, right? That's all he wants. He doesn't care about anything. I'm talking about the Christian God right now, not Allah, not Yahweh. The Christian God. All he wants is me to believe that Jesus died on a cross and went to heaven. And if I believe this one thing, I live forever. Okay. That's all he wants. He doesn't care about anything else. If that's all he wants, he can show up in my room right now and say, this is what I want. Or he can write it on the moon if he wanted to. He can do a lot of things to show me that he wants me to do that. I haven't seen anything to show me that he wants me to do it. The only people who are telling me this are the church. You got different religions, different denominations in Christianity. And if I look at all these groups, they all oppose each other. That alone shows me that they all can't be right. And it looks like they're all probably wrong, because none of them it looks like are being guided by anything. They all look like they have, like, okay, for example, the evangelicals in America, they all wanted Trump to win the election. Trump loses. Well, it doesn't look like God's on your side. The church, you look at the church, all the scandals and all the crazy stuff happening with the church history. As soon as Rome converts to Christianity, the rest of the Roman Empire falls within a century. The Eastern Roman Empire is constantly being shriveled up, being conquered by the northern borders are being infringed on by the Dacians and the Scythians and all those tribes. And then Islam totally goes through the Eastern Roman Empire, takes Egypt, takes Israel, takes Greece, takes Turkey. It looks like they don't have God on their side either. So it's like, where's the evidence that this God that is behind Christianity? Where is that? I don't see that. So for me, there's not enough evidence for me to say this is what God wants me to do. It's just people saying that, nothing else.
Yeah. Isn't it a bit fishy that God used to sort of appear every couple of nights to people, all sort of incredible in biblical proportion, as we call it, sort of miracles, splitting of seas and crazy stuff. But as soon as camcorders and mobile phones and cameras have started to appear, he's reduced to appearing on a piece of toast, kind of vaguely.
In fact, as soon as writing got good, as soon as we got good at storing paper and writing, which would be like, sort of like the Middle Ages, I would say. As soon as the Middle Ages comes around, medieval Middle Ages, that's when miracles are done. But before that, you go back to the antiquity and Bronze Age and all that, miracles all the time, every day. Basically, there's a miracle, because who's gonna tell you that it didn't happen? You don't have any. There's no one saying it didn't happen. Just people saying it did happen. But like you said, it's like, why did it just stop happening? What's more likely, that it never happened or that it stopped happening once we actually got able to record things?
Yeah, and our burden of proof is a lot higher now. Like right now, where the standard of what we want, like if a prophet arrives right now on the scene, what's going to happen to him at the moment. It's going to be, he's going to be ridiculed to no limit. Now, with the miracle situation, were you a Protestant, like a Presbyterian, or?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was a when I became a fundamentalist, I was a evangelical Baptist type.
All right.
I actually grew up Catholic, but
that was. Were you Catholic?
True. Yeah, it was like have an Italian side of my mom's side of the family was Italian. That was all it was. It was just sort of tradition. Right. Nobody was serious about it. In fact, as soon as I got my confirmation, I never went back ever again.
Right.
Until I got into trouble in my life, went to prison, read the Bible in prison. That's when I actually was like, oh yeah, this is speaking to me. Because Christianity actually does speak to a certain type of person, someone who's really the poor, the meek, the needy. It really speaks to those people. I'll give you an example. In Luke, there's a parable of the two sons where the one goes and spends all his money, and he takes his inheritance early, and he moves abroad, and he wastes all his money on just partying, and he becomes a beggar, and he finds himself sharing food with pigs in some sort of muddy area. He's like competing with pigs for food. And then he says to himself, you know what? I'm done living like this. I'm going to go back to my father's house. And that's the parable, is the father's house being going back to God, basically, and that's the parable of the son who comes back, and the father's happy about the son who screwed up everything, and doesn't care about the other son who was good the whole time, which is the Jews who are the devout temple, taking care of the temple and burning incense every day, and not and following the Torah perfectly, and not really veering off, but he doesn't care about that son. Who cares? That son doesn't. There's nothing to be grateful for. I'm gonna be grateful for the one who screwed everything up and then came back. That, to me, when you're someone in a situation like I was in, that sounds like it's speaking to someone like myself. So that's why it really preys on the weak, the Christianity. If you really pay attention to what the parables are saying, it's speaking to a certain type of person.
Yeah, no wonder Nietzsche called it the slave morality. It's very linked. It appeals to those sort of because you'll have a compensation later on. My mother was an Irish Catholic, well, she used to be Catholic, but the emphasis on miracles in Catholicism is really right there, to the point where sainthood is awarded still to this date based on 2 miracles performed. Mother Teresa, for example, a second miracle was confirmed after somebody puts her picture on somebody's stomach and a cancer was healed, and she was sort of given the sainthood at that point. So there are certain groups of within Christianity that will have way more emphasis on crazy stuff like speaking in tongues and sort of almost magic type of power. Were you in a church that sort of, because I know when I was talking to Derek, he used to speak in tongues and stuff like that. Were you experiencing these sort of things?
Yeah, we had a church that was at. They would have this every Sunday, and I think it was like Wednesday night before the actual service. Everybody would go into the one room, the main room, and all pray out loud at the same time. So it was a whole room of people just hear mumbling, and it's like, I don't know, like there's just weird things that we do. The singing, everybody just like feeling the spirit, and it's a psychology. There's a connected
Mm-hmm.
psychology that
Mm-hmm.
gets you when you're there. It's just, I know when people tell me that, oh, you don't know, I felt the Holy Spirit, it's real. I say, I know. No, I do know. And I don't think you're lying, because I felt that before too. I know exactly what you're talking about. And it's real. There's a real thing going on in the head. There really is something happening. It's not
Ma-
fake.
But mate, we know that this is nothing special. You can get that from a Metallica concert. You
Yep.
can get that from a Manchester United versus Liverpool Champions League final. You
Yeah,
can get that.
Buddhists get it, Muslims get it, pagans get it.
Yeah,
It's a psychology. It
yeah.
really is. And
It doesn't even have to be religious. Like
no,
it
it
could
doesn't
be
have to be,
completely secular.
like you
Yeah,
said, like it could be music, it could be a sports game. There's so many things that can trigger that, whatever it is, whatever that
yeah.
chemical is, that serotonin boost that happens.
I'm a Liverpool fan, so when you go to Anfield and they play the anthem, which is "You Never Walk Alone," there it's almost religious. It's almost
Yeah,
religious. You have 70 or 80,000 people singing the same song, and you feel like your heart is dropping. It's just like
yeah,
it's really it's something going on, but that is the power of being connected to something outside of you, and it's abstract.
yeah. No, it's really, it's real. It's real. And when I say that, I don't mean like it's real, like it's magic. I mean it's real, that there's a science behind what's going on. There's a way to explain why that's happening. That's what I say when I say it's real.
Yeah, CM is Scottish, I think, and there's a derby called the Old Firm in Scotland, Rangers versus Celtic, and it's one of the strongest football derbies in the world. Not just because of football and rivalry, but Celtic is Catholic and Rangers is Protestant,
Wow.
and that is a huge thing. So he would know about. So Liverpool is Catholic like Celtic, and Rangers and Chelsea, they have that sort of connection. So it's interesting how religion seeps into everyday life.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So when you say atheism, you've kind of clarified. You said, well, you got no objection to um, uh, different type of entity that we don't know about yet. Um, it could be something. It could be just a design. It might not even have a brain, or it might be not. It might not be even self-conscious. That thing. It could be just the laws of physics, and that's, I think, what Spinoza meant. And Einstein adopted that God. Uh, I think Einstein was thinking the laws of physics when he talked about God. But people always misunderstand physicists and scientists. Say, "Oh, look at him! Einstein talked about God doesn't play dice with the universe.
And
He was a believer."
he's talking about Spinoza's God too, not Christian God or Allah.
Exactly.
Thing. He's talking about a deistic. If anything, and this is like picking apart little lines of mass amounts of text that he's given. One sentence here, one sentence there. That's it. It's not like he's really caring about this subject or exploring it deeply. He's really not. He's looking for facts about reality. That's what he's looking for, right?
Exactly. Before I forget, if you notice behind my cabinets, there's all of these action figurines. These are all from Dr. Robert Price.
Yeah, yes.
The two boxes have arrived, so it's now.
I gotta give you my own so I can have some too.
yeah, it's pretty cool. So I bought a few things from him, and they have double the importance now. They come from Dr. Bob. But I'm creating that superhero theme behind me. Dr. Bob and I have that fascination with the archetypes and the superheroes, and maybe there is a link here. Our modern day fascination with superheroes. We've always understood Superman to be Jesus. There's a lot in the storyline that suggests that Superman is Jesus.
Yes, absolutely.
I even have a Lost Supper painting behind me here between Batman and Superman that has the Lost Supper, but in a superhero characters. And Superman is Jesus, and I think Batman is John. So we've got the different type of superheroes. Judas, I think, is Venom.
Nice.
So you gotta have to have a villain type of
yeah.
But maybe. So do you think then that Jungian archetype of us being fascinated with the savior character, the redeemer, the one that's there is something there?
I think Jung is onto something. Now I know a lot of people take Jung and they misinterpret him and they make him out to be some. He believes in. A lot of people say that he thought that dreams come from other places, and there's they try to make him into some sort of metaphysical. But if you actually forget what other people say about Jung, go to Jung's text by yourself and read it. And he really does explain things in a way that is doable. Like when he talks about he talks about the archetypes, he's talking about when we put together a character like Jesus or Superman, what we're doing is we're putting up the concept of what we feel is the highest idea that it comes, and it all relates to the times. It relates to the psychology of the connected of the population. This is something that if it's going to strike the hearts and minds of the people, there's going to be something there that's relatable. That everybody can sort of can get something from. So I think what Jung's talking about is he's looking at different archetypes based on different time periods and putting them together and saying, look, these are some patterns in human behavior that is that's present in psychology.
Yeah, and Sigmund Freud adds to this as well by proposing the id, the ego, and the superego.
I think Freud was first, actually.
Yes, Freud. Yeah, Freud was first. They actually worked together.
Right.
At some point. They collaborated, but they actually had a rift
Big
at
riff,
the end. So the id, the ego, and the superego. Id is your instinct and your natural instincts, and that's your baby, your infancy period, where you're selfish. You that's your food, your sex, and everything else. And then you have your superego. Superego might be linked to the archetype. That's the things that you strive to be. And that's the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde sort of rendition of your alter ego. God could be our alter ego, is the things that we would like to be ourselves, but maybe can't, fall short, and therefore create an image of ourselves that's a lot more perfect.
Yeah. And then there's two books by Jung that I've read that I'll never, that are just they're just so profound. And number one is the Red Book.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
the other one is called Man and Symbols. It's the last book that he wrote, and it's about dreams. It's about a lot about the archetypes, but it's a lot about
Symbolism and
symbolism. Yeah, and I'm telling you, that is a must read. It is a
yeah.
must. There's a lot of stuff in there that you might say, okay, this is a little bit, sounds a little crazy, but it's fascinating though.
Oh, look, you got to understand it in the time. You cannot judge it, but these are 200, 300 years old,
Yeah.
200 years old stuff. By the way, it's almost parallel to Sigmund Freud's the interpretation of dreams. There's a link. These two were rivals towards the end, and there's always every time somebody would make a move, the other would make a counter move.
They transform psychology forever.
Yes. But mind you, their ways are no longer the more archaic feature of psychology. Modern psychology has moved away from, and actually some people would call it pseudoscience at this point.
Yeah, Jungian psychoanalysis. I understand that. It's totally, that's not practiced anymore.
I still find it interesting though.
Yeah, of course, yeah. And I think it's I think what it did is it really, like for Jung, for example, and Freud as well, they really picked apart religion in a way where they took it and put it out there for everyone to see why it does what it does.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it so captivating? They explain how it works, how this thing works, the archetypes, the why religion is why it has this effect on people, because it is the psychology behind it. In fact, Jung would argue that the priests in the church era were the psychiatrists of the time period, or the druids in ancient Ireland, the Celts. They were that's what they were doing. They were the
precursors. Yeah, that's you get alchemy for chemistry. You get natural philosophers, and today they're called scientists. So, and that has to and to be nuanced, you've got to understand things in the context and the time frame. So people would call Aristotle was a bit of or Plato a crackpot and all that. You can say that, but that's 2,500 years old endeavor. It needs to be honored. These were the pioneers of their times.
Yeah, they were way ahead of their times. They really were. And we look at it now. We like point the finger because we know more now. But we didn't. It's not like we ourselves came up with this knowledge. We got it from the backs of them, on top of them, and then someone else built on that information, and then someone else built on that information, and then we're sitting here like, oh yeah, we're so cool, we're so smart, we know everything. Ha ha ha! Look how dumb they are. But like, one day people are gonna look back at us and look how dumb they were. They didn't know anything. It's gonna happen.
Yeah. It started from that Homo habilis, where somebody, hominid, a human-like sort of species. But they weren't quite human at that point, just looked at a stick and said, I can use this as a tool to do something with it. And it starts there. These are the baby steps towards where we are right now. And everybody almost has done something to accumulate that knowledge. So I have lots of respect for people that would actually stare the stagnant waters and come up with something new. It might be falsified. It's probably falsified, most of these things by now. But it's got people to think for the first time about the nature of things.
Yeah.
Here's a question from Jojo. I think he's a a familiar name. Probably you and Derek always have him
Oh
coming
yeah.
to your channel. He's what will make you change your mind about God? What would happen to make you think, oh well, bloody hell, God exists after all?
It's a good question. I would say an appearance that not just one person or that multiple people from different locations can see at once can corroborate with and prove that it happened. Like I need evidence. I need physical evidence. I need multiple witnesses, that type of stuff, not just a dream. Someone had a dream one day and God came to them and told them something. That's not enough, because we know dreams are bizarre. People have dreams all the time like that. But I guess that would be my answer. I don't know, something similar to the moon, like flying across the sky in front of everybody, and you know what I mean? Something bizarre, like something
Yeah.
absolutely mind blowing.
I think Lawrence Krauss said the stars rearranging themselves in the
Yeah,
sky to say
exactly.
something in Aramaic, which we wouldn't have a clue about because none of us understand Aramaic at that point.
That's what it would take.
It had to be in the lingua franca, probably English.
As far as I'm concerned, nothing like that's ever happened yet.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. You even if something appears to be true to you, I would actually doubt it myself because
Right.
we know our brains are capable of all sort of hallucinations and a bit of drug here and there, a overdose of alcohol, or your brain would see things, and that's not abnormal.
Yep.
So you'd want something kind of objectively verified. Somebody else would have to collaborate and multiple other people and say, bloody hell, we have no answer to that.
Or the question or the answer could be, when I die and I wake up in another realm, then yeah, what am I going to say to that? Oh, I still don't believe. Oh, I'm there now, so that might be it might take that happening. To me, I think the silliness of religion is that it matters what you believe. Because if there is a deity that's going to do something with you after you die, either you're going or you're not, and it doesn't matter what you believe. The fact that your thoughts make you suffer or go into bliss for eternity is so silly. It's so ridiculous that I don't
Yes.
understand how people don't understand that. It only makes sense from a perspective of an ancient kingdom or government that wants to get people to not commit crimes. Like, hey, if you do this, you're going to end up here. That makes sense. You know what I mean?
But you said something very profound there. You said thoughts should not take you to either hell or heaven because they're involuntary. We
Yeah.
have no control of our own thought. We can challenge the audience right now and say, try to come up with an idea. You'll find that your brain will think about the idea, and you would have no idea where it's come from.
Right.
It just pops up in your brain.
Yeah.
And I think Sam Harris does that in one of his very famous speech when he talks about challenging people to think of a song, and you'll find that the song that comes to your head, you have not orchestrated that coming of an idea. It just pops in your head, and you have no idea why it comes to your head. And if you try to be deliberate about your thoughts, it doesn't work that way. The
Right.
thoughts keep rushing into your brains, and you try to make sense of them after they come into your brain.
And I've always said this, the Christian God, the one that wants you just to have faith, right? What are you really doing by having faith? Are you really forcing yourself to believe something, or are you just giving allegiance to something and hoping that it's true? So when I'm a Christian, let's say I say, okay, I want to live forever. I don't know if Christianity is true. I can't prove that it's true. I haven't seen it. I've heard people say that it's true. Okay, but I want it to be true because I want to live forever. So what do? Okay, I get on my knees and I pray and I say, I believe that Jesus Christ died for my sins. Oh, look, it worked. I'm saved now. But what did you really do there? You gave allegiance to an idea. You didn't believe anything because you can't prove it. You don't know anything different. All you did was just decide to say some words, to say some magic words, and align yourself with a certain ideology, and that's all you've done. You didn't, nothing, there's no new information, there's no new evidence, nothing nothing magical really happened. You just decided to say, I align with the Christian idea. That's all you're doing. It's really just an allegiance.
Yeah, and this comment is quite interesting because I think Christianity takes a trophy here because unlike Islam and Judaism, where action is the one that's to be condemned or to be blessed, and Jesus is supposed to have come to make things easier and milder for people, but he's actually the first one to criminalize thoughts, instead of the action. So in terms of adultery, instead of just actually committing the adultery, you're thinking about it, and that's enough. That is condemned. So it's crazy because again, thoughts are involuntary. If there is a very beautiful woman that passes by, or a beautiful man, if you happen to be homosexual, you're suddenly attracted. You're suddenly having a thought coming to your head, but you're not acting upon it. You choose not to. You're saying, I'm going to behave. I'm not going to do a thing. But what a beautiful man, what a beautiful lady. But that's bad in Christianity. That you would have committed the act in your mind.
Well, this is why Nietzsche said that Christianity is Neoplatonism. What do you say? Neoplatonism meeting Judaism or something along those lines. Where what he means by that is because if you actually go back to the Platonic dialogues, but when they talk about religions and the gods, and they're talking about the concept of the people who actually believe are the ones who have easier time facing death because they actually believe they're going to some god or some eternal Elysian fields or something like that. They actually think they're going. The thought of them going is what saves them from death. It doesn't matter if they're going or not. It doesn't matter if they're right or not. The actual belief in that is what makes their death bearable because they think they're going there. So that's a Platonic idea, is to convince yourself that you're going there. It's also a play off the Plato's cave allegory, where you're stuck in this cave and you see the shadows and you think that's all the reality is. Some people want to be in that cave. Some people want to get out and tell other people hey, look, it's not real. This is all just an imaginary. Get away from me. Who are you? You're a heretic. Get out of here. That's what Nietzsche is talking about.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, we know the vast majority of people would rather be in the cave because it's less energy consumed by the brain. Thinking is a lot of is high energy, and we did not evolve to consume that much energy. The brain takes about 1,200 calories alone per day. So it's such an expensive machine. So obeying rules and things like that, it comes to us quite easily. This is an interesting comment because yes, Adam and Eve wouldn't have belly buttons because they were not given birth. Now, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam share the same Genesis, the same creation story. There might be some slight variations here and there, but what is your assessment of this weird story? And what do you think God was doing if he was eternal and everything else emerged from the creation of God? What was he doing when he was all alone?
Such a fascinating question because, what was going on before Adam and Eve? We're talking about eternity. We're not talking about a set amount of time. We're talking about forever. So you can't even wrap your head around it. Something had to have been going on, unless he was just sitting there like this the whole time. But I doubt that. Like, this God's doing stuff, right? And by the fact that he puts a tree in the middle of the garden, that only this tree you can't touch, but it's going to be right in the middle, and there's going to be a talking snake there also. And I'm going to walk away for a little bit. I'm just going to bounce out. Even though I can see everything, I know all future events because we know that from other passages where he can predict the future. I created you, so I know all about you. I know what your tendencies are. I know you're going to go to this plant. So he planned it. That's your only conclusion. If you don't think he planned it, then he's not omniscient, and he's not omniscient or omniscient, omnipotent or omniscient. He can't be both. He can be one or the other, but he really can't be both, because if he's all knowing, then he wouldn't have created Adam and Eve to do this, to act this way. He wouldn't have put a talking snake there. That takes away his all knowing. He's not all powerful, because if he's all powerful, I mean, he can just give everybody eternal life or whatever. Like he can just do whatever he wants then, but he's not doing that either. He's actually being. It shows you in the text that he's subservient to certain things that happen. So he has to drown everybody because of sin, or he has to do this, he has to do that. So he's not all powerful. He has to do things. So what is
Yeah.
this? This God isn't. I don't know what.
Well, the omniscience thing comes to question where, if you remember, after Adam and Eve ate from the forbidden fruit, it's not an apple, guys, because we don't know what fruit it was. It's never mentioned in the Bible what kind of fruit. It could be a guava. It could be anything.
Yeah.
But they were naked, and they realized they were naked for the first time, and they hid themselves with the leaves. And God comes and asks Adam, "Where are you?"
Like, if he doesn't know, I thought you're omniscient. If you're not omniscient,
I mean, that gives it away straight away. Like, that's pretty straightforward. Stuff like that. That's omniscience out of the window straight away.
right, out of
But
the window.
you're right. There is a reverse psychology of bringing that kid into a house full of toys and show him that red fire brigade truck and say, "See that toy? Do not touch it."
Right.
What do you think a 4 years old would do? He'd be obsessed. He'll think about nothing.
If I'm not mistaken, you might know this. I think there's been a study done where they actually had this done with kids.
Yeah.
And they brought kids into a room. I think I remember seeing this somewhere. I don't remember where. And they said, "Don't touch this one toy. We're gonna leave." And the kid doesn't know he's on camera. I think almost all of them, except for like one kid, touches it.
Yeah, absolutely. They'll get up. That's actually, he creates an obsession at that point. Yeah. Probably if you don't say a thing, that toy would never be touched, or it'll be random, But now you've installed the idea in their head, right? And the problem is the type of trees that give godlike abilities. So one is the knowledge of evil, good and evil. And obviously he panics after that episode and says, "Oh, there is a bloody other tree that gives eternal life, and if they'll eat from it, they'll be like us." So there are a couple of trees that if you consume from, you become a god.
Right.
God eat from these trees.
And they don't die right away either. Like he said, if you eat this, you'll surely die. They didn't die. And now when they do die, but do they, like, what does that mean? They're already taken out of heaven and put on the earth anyway. So it's like, if they never got taken out of heaven, would they have died? And if Adam dies, where does he go after he dies? Doesn't he go back to heaven? So who's really killing Adam? Is it the fruit, or is it the will of God that made Adam die?
But here's another curveball. The tree of good and evil. How can Adam and Eve condemned to have done something evil if they ate from the tree and only the knowledge of good and evil would have been revealed to them after them consuming from the tree? They had no knowledge of good and evil beforehand.
Wow, and that's such a good point. It's like,
so how can you? They didn't know. So it's almost exactly. So it's almost like your child's knocking a glass of water, and they never didn't know what that was there, and you didn't tell them, "Hey, be careful." And
by the way, whose fault would that be if a child that's not being attended falls off a cliff? Is it the child's fault, or is it the parents' fault for not watching? It's the parents' fault. Now, especially, it gets even worse because the parents don't create the child and the mind of the child. The parents just have the child. We're talking about the God that created Adam and Eve, that knows them inside and out. He designed it this way. That's the only conclusion you can come to, unless you want to say that this God is not perfect, not omniscient, like we said before. That's the only way. And logically, if you want to say A is A and B is B, that's what you got to go with, because that's what it comes down to.
Yeah. Now, the token serpent, because there are a lot of conflation. Some Christians think this is Lucifer, the shiny one, morning star. But we know that Lucifer didn't appear in Judaism until way later.
Until the church, till the Latin Bible. The first Bible that has the word Lucifer in it is like in 400 AD.
Yes. Yeah.
So Lucifer is actually from Greco-Roman mythology. He first shows up in Hesiod's. But he's not called Lucifer. He's called something, whatever the word is in Greek. But Lucifer is the Latin version of this light bringer. He's in Ovid's Metamorphosis, which is written before the New Testament. So before Jesus, there was a light bringer who's called the morning star. And now after Lucifer, you get Jesus, who's called the morning star. But like, they're not polar opposites. They're different deities from different religions, totally different. And there's no Lucifer in Judaism at all. Satan is just the accuser. If you just took the Old Testament by itself, Satan is a completely different concept than what you get in the New Testament. The word Satan just means the accuser. He actually hangs out with God all day. He's in the court of hell. And his job is to look down at earth and blame people for things. He blames Job, and God says, no, Job's blameless. All right, let's make a deal. And they're basically casting lots on if Job's going to screw up or not. That God and Satan are buddies in the Old Testament. It's not He's not the arch nemesis. He never falls. There's no fallen angel thing. That comes way later. That's like John Milton's Lost Paradise. This is all like European stuff.
So Lucifer is obviously the Latin, and in the Bible, I think it starts to come to be widely acknowledged in the Book of Job, and I think the word is Hasatan. I think in Hebrew is the adversary.
Yeah, and the Lucifer thing comes in Isaiah 53, I think it is, or no, Isaiah 14. Isaiah 14, it says in Hebrew Halel, which means it's the day star. It's basically talking about the planet Venus. The planet Venus shines first in the morning, or shines last from the night into the morning. It's the last planet.
Brightest. Yeah.
So it's called the morning star. And what Isaiah is doing is he's using this as a literary device, as a metaphor for the king of Babylon, who was like the highest, who was like the morning star, and he fell from his position. Like, how could you fall, morning star? He's basically, it's a metaphor. It's not talking about a deity. It's not talking about Lucifer or the god Venus. It's talking about the planet. He's making a comparison to the king. And then it's funny because later on, Christians take this in the church era. Jerome's doing this, and they're identifying Lucifer, the god from Ovid's Metamorphosis, who's also goes back to the Greek legends of Hesiod, and they're identifying this deity as what Isaiah is talking about. And then later on, even after that, this Satan gets combined with this Lucifer deity, who's also in the book of Revelation combined with Hades and Pluto, basically all the underworld gods, all these archetypes. It's an archetype. It's a Jungian archetype. They made this out of all these different characters. And he becomes the arch nemesis of Satan, of Jesus, who falls from heaven. And they've taken that from the book of Enoch. But now you're saying, wait, so you're saying that Satan did fall? No. If you read the book of Enoch, it's an angel named Azazel, not Satan. So they took a character named Azazel, who is a fallen angel, who teaches men how to make metals, and he gets kicked out of heaven, and his punishment is he has to stay on earth for the rest of his life. And that's all that really happens. It's not like he's not going to war in heaven like Revelation talks about. Revelation takes Azazel and turns him into Satan, and then makes him 10 times more powerful, and all of a sudden there's a war in heaven between Satan and God. That is completely foreign to Judaism.
Right. So if the serpent isn't Lucifer, and we've been told that sin enters the existence through the fall and through the sin of Adam and Eve eating from the forbidden fruit, what was then a serpent, obviously being sneaky and saying things against God and obviously evil stuff? Why was there evil before the fall? And who's responsible for that?
I mean, it's sort of like what we just said in Isaiah, where Isaiah is taking the the shining star and comparing this fallen king. Well, whoever's writing Genesis is saying that the serpent, which is a low creature, which crawls on its belly, the lowest, the it's representing the nature of human flesh, like the fleshly, the the non-high, the
Yeah,
low. That's
yeah.
all it's doing. It's a metaphor. It's not really a character that's gonna. It's
We,
not
we
really.
still we still use it today when we try to bag journalism. We call them the gutter journalism, so they're very close to the ground.
Yeah, I would even say that. I would even say that early Israelites probably didn't even believe that this serpent was even real. They're probably it's probably meta. It's funny because I think the people who actually wrote this thing knew was just a metaphor of how sin enters the world through the desire of the flesh, using the
Yeah.
serpent as a symbol for that.
It's funny though that the serpents that we know, sort of, the one we perceive to crawl in its belly, when it was time for punishment, and Ricky Gervais and his stand-up comedy makes a big joke about it. And says, God summons the serpent, say, and your punishment is for you to crawl in your belly and eat dust for the rest of your life. And the serpent thinks to itself, oh no, I won't be able to fly anymore like I used to.
Right.
It's like, well, that's what's been doing all along. So it's hardly a punishment.
Right. It's what it always does. That's I think that's part of like the point is like that's I don't know. It is a funny story. It is kind of it
Yeah,
is pretty interesting.
but then some smart people will come to you and say, "Oh, no, this is a sign for evolution here, because serpents used to have little limbs and little legs, and this is how they evolved into modern day snakes, where they
Is
lost
that true?
their limbs. Some so lizard like have actually lost their limbs and have become sort of types of snakes." But obviously, I don't think the connection was made there. I don't think they had that knowledge at that time. But it still begs the question: what was evil doing? And did God permit that? Because again, omniscience has come to question here. If God knows everything, He would have known about this servant trying to do that, unless He's allowed it to see if His servant Adam and Eve are going to obey Him. It's part of the big. But again, because He's omniscient, He'd know what they're about to do.
Yeah.
Um, it's a
And what's funny about all of this is that when Islam comes around in the 7th century, they're a product of all of these twisted multiplying and adding of all these ideas. Like I mentioned, how Christianity takes Lucifer, Satan, Hades, Pluto, all these archetypes for what they think is the archetype for what they think is evil. And then you get these Gnostic Christians who make all these new myths about Satan falling, and they're basically taking Azazel's myth and they're changing it. And it's got this character named Iblis, who ends up in the Quran, who somehow is equated with Satan, just like how Lucifer is. So you just have another version of that happening in another book called the Quran, and it's just another example of basically human telephone.
mhm.
That's all it is. It's the same. It's the same tree of information, but in a different direction, different branch, a different direction. It really
I
is.
like that. I like that analogy, human telephone, because that game, once you play it, from the very, very first of the queue, it's completely nothing to do with the first statement that was ever made. So it's always distorted to, like, you can't even recognize it anymore. It always changes. So this interesting story of Genesis, it's quite interesting, and it was so funny to see how God is panicking to protect the second tree by putting a flaming sword and a sort of a mythological creature to guard it. So again, puts a question mark on the omnipotence thing. Why would God need? If He's so powerful, I'll click my fingers and it just happens. You make it
Yeah.
disappear or whatever. But
Well,
it's still there. But He had to put a sword around it, a flaming one, and a beast, like a bodyguard, bouncer.
I think the biggest way to highlight how silly this is Noah's Ark. Because okay, here you got Noah's Ark, and Noah has to do these things. He has to make a boat, take 2 of every animal, and go on a boat for exactly a year. Why? Why doesn't God just snap his fingers and everyone who he wants to be dead is dead and gone, disappeared? And everyone who he likes and wants to keep is right where they in the position they were before. Can't he stop time for a second? Take all the wickedness away, put all the good stuff back, to redesign it the way what's with all these processes of natural trying to explain things naturally. Noah took 2 of every animal because he's going to need that to start the world back over. Wait a minute. Hold on a second. You're telling me that 2 of every animal repopulated the whole planet back to their natural habitats where they always been, where the fossil record shows that they've always been, based on tectonic plates, where you got 2 of the same animals on different sides of the plates, separating what looks like a puzzle piece, what's going to confuse scientists. Why? Oh, probably Satan did it. That's what Justin Martyr would say. Justin Martyr says that all these other myths that look like Christianity is because of demons.
Yeah, they're screwing around with us.
Yeah.
Have you seen Russell Crowe's Noah?
No, I haven't.
You've got to watch this, Neil. It's by the director Darren Aronofsky, who is the director of Mother. You know, the one with. So
Yeah.
there is a twist because Russell Crowe plays Noah, so it's biblical. But there's a twist because Darren Aronofsky is an atheist. So you got to watch that. It's brilliant. And it's got Anthony Hopkins as well. It's quality.
I'm gonna watch that tonight, actually, when I wind down. I'm gonna watch
that. It's pretty cool because there's a bit where Noah is almost put in the same choice that he has to make, like Abraham, to kill one of his granddaughters because God told him so. And he actually, and I don't want to kill the movie for you.
Have you ever seen this movie with Liam Neeson, and he's a Christian? What is it called? Man, I can't remember the name of it. Oh man, it's such a good movie. It's with Liam Neeson and Andrew Garfield, and I'm looking it up right now, and they're Christians, and it's so good. If anyone in the chat knows it, let's see, what is it called? Oh, Silence. There it is.
Silence.
If you haven't seen this movie yet, it is so good. And
Here we go. Go watch something to watch tonight.
By the way, Christians will love this movie too because it really, really highlights what it is to have faith and what to stick to your religion. And this is so masterfully done that you can. This is a movie that both atheists, full-blown theists, can get together and watch together. I'm telling you, it highlights both sides, and the psychology of the atheist and the psychology of the theist brings them together. And the way it ends is you don't know what to think. Wow, that was just so good. So one of my favorite movies I ever watched.
Wow. Okay, I'm seeing it right now. Looks like we've got something to watch tonight.
Yeah, you gave me an idea. I gave you an idea. Now we both got to watch. Both got to come back with our reports on how we like their movies.
Fantastic. So getting away now. So the story of Genesis. You know, Adam and Eve are on Earth, and they are having to suffer the repercussions of their action by Adam having to work so hard for the money. Like Donna Summer once said, you have to work hard for the money. And Eve have to struggle through birth and the pain and the snake will always be there for the Son of Man to sort of lead them astray, and men will struggle against the power of Satan because he will have kind of power to tamper with our world. And we get into that situation where God reveals his messages. So, well, I can't be mad for that long. Let's start sending them some droplets of our essence again. And those droplets will be in the form of prophets will come, and we'll start talking to them about because obviously we're talking about various generations, and there's a separation now. The generation that have seen God firsthand are no longer, and they probably got that as knowledge, as stories, and maybe these stories have got distorted and they got vague, and men started to struggle in life, and they maybe are separated from God. So God said, well, we can't really have that. let's start reminding them of us by sending them some, you know, ideas who we used to be, and maybe we can reconnect and rekindle. And it starts with all these pre-Mosaic laws, all these weird types of prophets that sort of not perfect, they all commit all sort of weird things, and their message were never clear. What do you think of these, like the pre-Socratic, it's almost like the pre-prophetic era of these very weird type of prophets that were supposed to be linking humanity back to God?
It's for me, it's like, what I think what's happening is, I think you're getting a mix of different text getting crammed together into one and trying to make sense of it. And they're coming from different influences and different times periods, and they're trying to compile it into one narrative and trying to make it coherent. So then you get a lot of stitching of two different texts, like you got the priestly sources, the Yahweh sources, and they're sticking these sources together. And that's why, like you said, the word weird, that's why they come out so weird, is because it's a hodgepodge of ideas and concepts getting crammed into one narrative and trying to make it coherent when it just can't be. So what happens is you get different characters like Isaac and Jacob and Joseph, and they're all have different ideas and different agendas, and they're in different parts of the world. One's in Egypt, and one's in Babylon, one's in Syria, one's in Judea. And like, you get different weird stories that really don't make a lot of sense because we lost the context. We really did. And the only context we have is the post Mosaic, like you said, the Mosaic after the Exodus. Then the laws are given. That's the context that we're trying to see it through. And then sometimes it's even worse than that. Sometimes the context is Christianity. Is how does it relate to Jesus? So then the context gets even worse. It gets even more skewed, and they're fitting round pegs into square. That's what happens. You're just making. That's what apologetics is. Apologetics is basically, over time, you get all these questions from people like us, from skeptics. For centuries, people have been asking questions. And then apologetics comes up with, well, what's a logical way to answer this based on however we want? We can just get creative and come up with an answer and make A equal B, and then just that's it. Then the next apologist takes that information and builds on it. And then over centuries, you have a powerful, strong apologetics core that's based on centuries of questioning and answering. And it's really intricate.
You just reminded me, because I was thinking now Abraham will be the link where we're going to use, because that's why we call it Abrahamic religions, all three. But there's another movie I just remembered by Jack Black. He's a funny dude. You probably know about him.
Black, yeah.
I love you. There's a movie called Year One.
Oh, and yeah, I saw that.
Remember the one with Abraham trying to kill his son?
Yeah.
And it's the guy from Superbad, McLovin.
Yeah.
It's a brilliant movie. It's taking the piss. I remember Jack Black eating from the tree of knowledge, and after biting into the apple, he goes, "Bloody hell! I feel knowledgey. Ask me a question quickly. Ask me a question." And then he asks him a question. He goes, "Pass, pass." It was so funny. But in the Abrahamic tradition, this is the one prophet that links all three. However, it's Isaac for Christian and Jews, and it's Ishmael.
Ishmael, right?
Ishmael. So these are the two that's supposed to have had the psychological trauma forever. Because I'm just thinking, if I'm the kid and my dad is about to slay me, I think I'm traumatized for life.
Right.
What do you think of this story? I mean, why would God do that? It's a very strange lesson to be taught.
It is, especially with Ishmael. What Ishmael and his mom, Hagar.
Egyptian.
The Egyptian. They get sent out to the desert, and it's supposed to be like an origin story for the Arabs.
Yeah.
The Arabs accept this story, but all they do is they tweak it a little bit to make Ishmael more important.
Well, they say
story.
Yeah, but no, no, no. In the Quran, Ishmael is the one
Right.
that was supposed to be.
They switched the blessing around.
Yes.
But they still have the Ishmaelites in the Arabian Peninsula. They don't deny that, which is fascinating because the thing about Islam is they have to accept the Jewish text to a certain degree, but they never tell you what that degree is. You just have to like sort of guess on how much is real and how much is. And basically, it's every Muslim has their own answer to that. You go to a Muslim, oh, what about this passage that directly opposes what it says in the Quran? Oh, that's been corrupted by the Jews. Oh, okay. Well, where's the real text then? Oh, it's been lost. Oh, so
Yeah,
you're
it's
saying, so you're
easy
saying
way
God
out.
can't preserve? Yeah, it's just a cop out. You're right.
Yeah, yeah, it's crazy, but it's quite interesting because this is where we get to see a bit of clarity. Now, the covenant is starting. You know that there is a solemn commitment with God to His people, and He chooses a certain people. So again, one more time, you know, He's done it with Cain and Abel, accepting the offering of one and not the other, causing the first homicide in humanity not being a nice father. Because a father, if you have two kids,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
and
By the way, I love how you're burning meat, but the one that's got plants, I don't like that. Like, what's that about? What?
obviously not a vegetarian, yeah,
Yeah, I like the one that slaughters my other creations, but
yeah.
the one that eats from the plants that I made you that I gave to you to eat. I don't like that one. Like, what is that? That's mind blowing stuff right there.
It's crazy, this is now going to be a feature.
It's a sadistic deity if you think about
Yeah,
it.
but he's taking sides as well. I mean, if it's going to be a first racist or a first ethno groupist,
And
he'd
he
be the
admits
god.
that he's a jealous god too,
Yeah.
all over. I'm a jealous god. Wait, what? Why is no one talking about that thing? That is like you're admitting you have defects, but you're supposed to be supposed to be a god of love, but I'm a jealous god. Jealousy does not equal love. Sorry. Just doesn't. That's just basics. Like, and another thing I noticed about it, back to Islam again, we're talking about how it has to accept Judaism to an extent. A lot of the prophets' names have Jah in the end, Elijah, or even the name Jesus means Yahweh saves. So they're accepting that Yahweh is the God, but they don't call him that. They call him Allah. So it's like, to me, that's where it gets there's too much gray area to play around in, and you just
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I mean, the definitely Islam has plagiarized a lot of the Jewish text and to try to Arabize it, but then the Jewish or the original Jewish names are still there. Or like the angel. Okay, Islam claims that the language of paradise is Arabic.
right.
Yet all
We know we know
the
Arabic.
angels are names, yeah, in Hebrew.
But Arabic is funny because Arabic has roots in like Persian and like even like some Sanskrit influences. Like the numerals are Sanskrit, so it's not a pure language. You can see how it has roots from the east and in the
A-
west.
And Neil, there is no such thing.
Yeah,
There
there's
is no
no
such
such
thing as
thing.
a pure. The
Hebrew is not pure either.
Exactly. One of the features of language, it's almost like it's the evolution, the natural selection evolution in the organic world, but
Yeah.
it's happening to the means. You don't live in isolation. You have neighboring countries you do trades with, and you exchange words, and usually they come from similar type of groups of languages, and there will be influences throughout. We still have this to date. We use German words like kindergarten and Schadenfreude. The Germans now will use some English words like cool with K instead of a C. but the languages are now so international that you can borrow from déjà vu is a French, and we know what déjà vu. We don't know the English word for déjà vu is, but it's a French word. It means have seen before. I've had a déjà vu. Um, so that's what language is. If anybody that tells you there is something is a pure language is lying to you, because languages are not discovered, they're made.
Right. The cuneiform script came about, and there's different types of that too. There's the Akkadian, there's Sumerian, and then you have branching off of that, you have all
Yeah,
the other Semitic languages, and then even the Semitic languages have a Phoenician origin of the alphabet, which also
Yeah.
influences the Greek, comes from Proto-Indo-European. The African languages jump into there, and they're sort of like parent languages. You have the mother language, the parent language, and the child language, and sort of like a family tree. Like two languages, like you can get a part of the world where two languages are sort of meshing, and then you get another language out of that, and that happens over time, over centuries and centuries and centuries, and eventually you have all the languages we have today. So,
Yeah.
like you said, there's not a language that we can point to that says that's the oldest one. It goes back the farthest. It's like, no, they're all affected by some sort of region that they're in. Even
Yeah.
people say Sanskrit is like this. Well, Sanskrit, yeah, in a way, it sort of goes back farther than most of the languages that are around today. But even Sanskrit comes from Brahmic, or I think it's called, and that comes from something else. And there is no language that exists, or alphabet that exists, I should say, that started from day one and stayed the same.
Yes. Agreed. I mean, it happens. Look at the English language. It's evolving. Apparently, there's like 8,000 words are being created every day in the world as we speak. You know, just out of inventions and new ideas and linking hybrid of ideas together to come up with new concepts. That's what language is for. And that's why did languages become dead? Because they're no longer coping with the pattern of thinking and science. Arabic is going to, if it doesn't evolve very fast, I think it's going to be a dead language very soon, because it's
and
sitting.
by the way, in Hebrew, modern Hebrew was a dead language, I should say.
Correct. It resurrected.
Biblical Hebrew basically is a dead language, but you got Yiddish coming from German area and relocating to Israel after World War II, and it's a lot of that language comes from Europe. It's not really pure Hebrew anymore. It's different.
Yeah, the Yiddish is obviously there's a lot of in New York. You got a lot of Yiddish speaking people. You know, this is where the word schmuck comes from, and we use schmuck. You know, schmuck has become an international word for being. I think there was a movie called Dinner with Schmucks, and that sort of made that word quite international. An idiot.
Yeah.
But this poses a question: what the insistence on using languages? So all these prophets were giving the message orally by God. You know, God would speak into them, and they deliver messages. But only 3 books or 4 books, arguably, because in Islam they reckon David was given a book called the Zabur. That's not sort of. I don't think there's a mention of it elsewhere. I don't think David was given a book, but we have the book of obviously the Old Testament, and that wasn't given. We get to know about it now soon from you, but arguably the direct in Christianity and Judaism, at least, the direct writings of God is just the 10 Commandments. This is the first time God communicates.
And what's funny about that is this is the only time you have etched from the hand of God onto stone some things that he wants you to do. So if you're supposed to believe this, you're telling me, this is for Christians and Muslims, right? You're telling me that you're supposed to accept Peter's dream. Peter has a dream, right? That says, oh yeah, you can eat whatever you want now. I had a dream. You're telling me that I'm supposed to believe Peter's dream over the etched hand of God on a stone. So if I was a Jew, I'm saying no to that. Or on the Muslim side of things, Muhammad has a vision that he gets from an angel who says they got it from God. So you're saying I have to accept that over the etched hand of God. So in the end, you're supposed to take the word from somebody, from some human mortal, over what is supposedly the etched on a rock by the hand of God itself. To me, it's
very
like
strange.
Yeah. And then if you are to accept that, if you are to accept Islam or Christianity over Judaism, you're basically saying that God's a liar and he changes his mind. He's lying to the Jews and he's changing his mind in favor of Islam or in favor of Christianity. And that the 10 Commandments that he made, where he says, keep the Sabbath holy, forget about that. I changed my mind then. So now you have to make a huge change in the whole entire thing. So it all falls apart just because of that. I'm glad you brought that up. That's a good point.
Yeah, and the 10 Commandments supposed to be the first 10 moral compasses or directions to give to humanity. And the very first 4 of these commandments have nothing to do with morality. It's to do with the brushing of the ego of that God. It's not. And when he starts talking about morality, he makes the huge mistake of, like, when he talks about women, do not covet your neighbor's ox, house, or woman. Clubs it with the position of man. It's like, this is the position of man, and do not covet these, which is, I found it very strange. So this is but then comes I think in the Old Testament, the first 5, Moses only comes up with the first 5 books from memory, first 5 books, and they were only
they're attributed to him. Yeah,
attributed to him. Obviously,
no Moses in the historical record.
Yes,
there is a king Moses. Amosis, Amosha. That's also a popular Egyptian name. But
yes,
but Moses isn't a king, so is that him? I don't know. Probably not.
Yeah. Well, the other part of me is I'm half Egyptian, and I can tell you, Egypt was occupied in 1967 by Israel after the 67 war, the 6 Days War, and the archaeologists enter Sinai to find a plate or a dish. Obviously, 40 years. Well, we're talking about 1.3 million, according to Bart Ehrman, of Jews, and not including children and women. So we're talking maybe 1.5, 1.6, maybe 2 million. This is an incredible number for 40 years.
And no archaeology.
Nothing.
And by the way, it mentions that they show up to an oasis. And the oasis is specific. It has 12 streams of rivers, and 70 palm trees. Oh, wow. We have a spot now where there should be archaeology of this place. We should be able to find the remnants of these streams and these palm trees, and we should be able to find this place. That place does not exist. It's a mythological place. It looks like an image of a zodiac. 12 streams, 70 palm trees. That's what it is. It's astrotheology. So I think that the Exodus is a metaphor, is an allegory of Canaan, who was a state part of the Canaan was part of Egypt. Egypt was big. It went all the way to Syria, and that was the border of Egypt. But when Egypt lost control over time, just slowly over time, just because it's the way politics is and geopolitics, it just lost it. I think that the parting of the Red Sea is an allegory of Egypt and Canaan losing its connection.
It could be used as that for sure, because maybe all these myths that's attributed to God religions, they have a predication or some traces in normal stories, like countries going into war or collapse of civilization. I can understand that put into sort of a legend, and that legend becomes religion later on. And I think that's how most religions sort of evolve anyway. It probably starts with a story that happened, but it gets made bigger and enter some supernatural stuff and God, and you've got yourself a religion or a supernatural story. But just to confirm, Joseph, I mean, we're talking about Egyptians who sort of documented a lot of stuff. There's no mention of Joseph. There is no mention of Moses in any count. Like there is nothing. It's like no trace whatsoever. But let's say the Egyptians were horrified by the triumph of the Jews, and they emitted that from the history of the Egyptians. What about neighboring countries who were fighting with the Egyptians, who would like to brag about how the Egyptians fail? What about some archaeology, some actual evidence that these people existed in the Sinai Peninsula? So there is most Israelis now who are pretty much secular. They know that this story never happened, and it's supposed to be a figure of speech.
Right.
So Muslims believe that Moses was literally given a book called the Torah. And I'd like to thank Constellation Pegasus. Thank you very much for the super chat, and we'll come to your question in a second here. So they think, Muslims think that the Gospels, or the Gospel, because there's one,
Right.
and the Torah were both given to Moses and Jesus by God, like the Quran ascended from heaven. They were written before these prophets existed.
How do you explain that? It's that's I know that there's the word maktub, which means destiny. So they think that God just designs this whole entire thing. It's all predetermined.
Yeah,
Then why is anything any of our faults?
exactly.
Because nothing can be my fault. It's all predetermined. It's just so silly. The whole
Do,
thing.
do you know what the way out for that? He's like, it's predetermined by God, but you don't know the outcome. So therefore, you're still responsible.
I've had a Muslim tell me, my good friend of mine, Ali, I love the guy. He's from Lebanon, and he tells me that there was a time before I was born where I agreed to come into an earthly body and come here. And I said, why? Why wouldn't I just stay there? He said, well, this is within the Hadith and blah, blah, blah. Okay, whatever, dude. I don't. If I don't remember that, then why should I be liable? Well, you do. You remembered it when you were a baby, but you forgot. Yeah, okay.
Well, that's Plato.
That
That's
sounds
Plato.
like mind control. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's incredible.
It
People
really is.
still believe in that. Constellation Picker says, I don't have information on this. You might have.
Yeah, that's a good question. Job is the oldest chronological book written. So it doesn't take, it's not like they're saying Job is the earliest event that happened. But if you actually take a look at the context of what's inside Job, this is happening before Israel is a nation. There's no mention of Israel. There's no mention of the temple. Job is some guy living in some far land, probably near like Sumeria or Babylon or something, somewhere over there. And it's you based on the context of the what's whoever wrote this. It's very old, so it predates all these other books, the books that we get from Moses, the Torah. But the Torah is there's whoever's writing the Torah is writing it after Job got written and saying that these events took place before the events of Job. So why is it not in chronological order? Because it's considered a wisdom book. So they lump Job in with Psalms, Proverbs, and Ecclesiastes. Those are 4 wisdom books. Because Job, because of what happens with Job, it's basically telling you that you should never curse God. Things are going to happen. You might be being tested, or it's never God's fault. It's always just this God. You don't understand God. Don't try to. Who are you to try to understand who fastened the moon? Were you there when he fastened the sun? It's really, really philosophical. It's actually a really good book, by the way. You should read it. It's a great book.
Well, you see, according to Bart Ehrman, he thinks this book was written by 2 different authors over 2 different eras.
I believe him. Bart Ehrman knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, he reckons there is an older part and is a newer part.
I would be surprised if there wasn't someone adding on and changing things. To me, that's a no-brainer. I think that happens more often than we think. I think it happens more often. But yeah, but that's why Job is placed near Psalms and Proverbs, because it's considered a wisdom book.
Wisdom, yeah.
It's the Bible, especially the Christian. Believe it or not, the Jewish Bible, the Tanakh, is not the same order as the Old Testament in the Christian Bible. The Old Testament of the Christian Bible ends with Malachi, because Malachi ends on Elijah's going to come back and we need a Messiah. It ends right on that, so you don't lose your context. You go right from Malachi to Matthew to saying, here's John the Baptist, who's the new Elijah, here's the Messiah. But the real Tanakh, which is the Hebrew Bible, it ends with Chronicles and the history books, because it's basically telling you this is the end of the history. You know, it's got a different ending. And by the way, the prophets end on chronologically with Ezra and Nehemiah, because those are the last 2 prophets when the second temple is rebuilt. So it's telling you, it's ending on the need for the law. Israel was given the law. Israel sinned. Israel went to Babylon. Israel comes back from Babylon. Israel rebuilds the temple. Happy ending. Whereas in the Christian Bible, the Old Testament, bad ending. Everything's horrible. We need a Messiah now. So you can see where the Christians are trying to manipulate the text by reordering the books.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
So we've got another 20 to 25 minutes. I know it's getting late for you, Neil, as well. And you've had a long day with a lot of information you have to disperse. So probably mentally fatigued as well. So we've reached the point of Moses, and the issues around Moses and the Exodus. Now we want to cover Jesus and Muhammad in the next 25 minutes, because looks like we're into something nice here. We've taken Genesis, and we're tracing that evolution of God through his messages. The God of the Old Testament is an aloof father. This is the father that would coerce you, that would punish you, who's angry. There's not much love in there. Then comes Jesus, and the conversation is completely different. It could not be the same God, in my opinion. He's a very different type of God.
Yeah.
And the story changes. The covenant is supposed to be with the Israelites, with the Jewish people, and Jesus emphasized that when he talked about the sheep of Israel, that he was sent to the sheep of Israel. Paul, after the departure of Jesus, has opened up Christianity for the Gentile, for the uncircumcised. And it's through, and the new covenant is through the acceptance of Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, for your original sin, and for your sins in general. And that's a new covenant. It's no longer with the covenant of the Israelites. It's to do with the accepting of Jesus Christ. What happened there?
What do you mean by what happened?
Why is that shift? What could it be the same God changing strategy? His message was supposed to be for certain people. Now it's open to humanity.
Yeah.
What happened?
Okay, I get what you're saying now. What I think, my personal opinion, I guess I should say, is that this is different people writing for a new audience. So this is now for the Roman people, the Greco-Roman world, and not just the Jewish world. This is for a bigger audience. This has to change. They have to change the tone of who they're speaking to now. So now it has to have a different message. It has to have a better message for the Gentile world. So yeah, circumcision, do it if you feel like it. That's what it's doing. That's the answer to that, and I think that's pretty obvious.
So it is spreading the word of God. So their lives maybe contenting with just a group of people forever. Might not be as effective, and needs to open up the message for the bigger masses.
I don't think it's the Israelites that are trying to do this. I think it's
the Romans.
I think this is I'm not going to say that it was like the Roman Empire of Vespasian doing this, but I think there is a Hellenized group of Jews, or of sort of like this is
like Josephus. Josephus was a Hellenized Jew.
Yeah, people like Josephus, like Philo in Egypt. So we're talking about people in Syria, people in Egypt, people in Turkey, not necessarily the Orthodox Sadducees who are in the temple, who are still following the Leviticus. This is not these guys. This is a result of the Hebrew Bible being translated into Greek. When you get the Septuagint after Alexander the Great, a couple centuries down, or a couple generations later, the Ptolemies, they translate this book in the Greek. It gets spread all over the Eastern Roman Empire. It gets into Syria. That's where you get these Hellenized Jews. These are a different type of Jews that already they know Greek mythology. They know the Roman stories. They know the Aeneid. They know Ovid's Metamorphosis. They have more of a canon, I guess you would say. So that's how you get like books like Revelation that are playing off, oh, Hades gave up its dead. No Jew would ever say that. Only a pagan would say that. But it's a Christian book. So that's what Christianity basically is. It's like this this hodgepodge of ideas, but it's like pretending to be a only Jewish thing, but really its influences are all over the place.
I'm in agreement with you. I think Yahweh, who was like blunt, straightforward, bland, not very interesting to be honest, gets Hellenized. It gets into the Hellenistic sort of culture where there's tragedy, where there's drama, where there's comedy, there's complex ideas, and becomes this complex.
Yep.
It changes, and it's the influence of the tragedy. The God that
Dionysus.
dies for it. It's so tragic. I mean, you watch the Mel Gibson's Jesus movie, and like a bloody atheist, and I dropped a tear. I couldn't help it.
Yeah, well, if you look at the Bacchic, the Euripides Bacchide, and this is written 400 BC. This is old, and it opens up the first sentence of chapter 1, page 1. The Son of God has entered the world. That sounds like something similar in our modern minds. That sounds like Christian. Well, it's the other way around. The Christians are looking at or influencing this God-man thing. Is a concept that's being tossed around in the ancient world. Alexander the Great comes to visit Seleucus in a dream in the 320s BC, according to Diodorus of Sicily. So this is like these men who ascend to heaven. Romulus dies. He gets sent to the right hand of Zeus, and then comes back down and becomes a savior to Rome. This is an idea that's all over the place already. So by the time it gets to Christianity, what you're seeing is, like, I'll give you, like, go back to Bacchus, for example. Bacchus, when he comes back in his glory, and everyone wants to repent, he is the son of Zeus. This is the son of God. Oh my God. And he said, it's too late. I gave you your chance and you didn't believe in me. So now the wages of your sin are death. This is what it says in the Bacchide. That's what? You're telling me that you have a God, the Son of God, who tells the people that all they have to do is believe in him, and if they don't, they're in trouble? What does that sound like? So these are ideas that are getting brought into the fold, into the mix, when these Hellenized, Greek-speaking, Greek-writing Jews are making the Gospels. So they're making a worldly Messiah, not just a Jewish Messiah, a worldly Messiah for the whole Roman Empire.
Yeah, and to emphasize that we've created God in our own image, we skip to Islam, where suddenly the God's image or God's reflection is back to the Jewish one again, because of the culture and the habitat that gave rise to the idea. It's a desert, it's a Bedouin, nomadic,
Right.
unstable people, and suddenly there's a devolution in God. He's gone back to the
no, and that's a good point, because it's speaking to that audience, that the desert dwelling people. The Quran has a different audience, so it has a different tone. It has different laws for different people, different location. So you're hearing about these jinn. Who are these jinn? Well, that's some folklore from pagan Arabia. So that gets somehow, just like the Romans brought the Dionysus themes into the Christian world, the Arabs are bringing their stuff into their fold.
You see that there's a connection. Dionysus connected to wine, and the gin, you just add tonic and you got yourself a drink. But it's very true. It's if God is consistent and he's outside of space-time, why is he suddenly takes the culture and the image of the people that sort of, he's harsh when it's desert, he's a bit more sophisticated and difficult to understand when it's Hellenistic sort of culture. You go to the Eastern religions and suddenly God idea is completely different to suit the way people are really thinking. It sounds like the more I think about this God dude, he's just an idea, and we are creating him as we go along, it's not consistent.
Well, couldn't have said it better myself.
It's incredible. I think we're wrapping things up in the next 5. So to wrap all these ideas together, that evolution of God from Genesis all the way to the God of Islam, and you have three different types of people right now. I think the Jews are maybe 15 million people of that around the whole world. Most of them are in Israel and dispersed around the world. Christians are, I think, about 2.5 to 2.6 billion. Muslims about 1.9 billion. The most rising category right now is the irreligious. We're, I think, 1.3 billions at the moment. We've overtaken Buddhism and Hinduism.
Wow.
Uh,
Science, huh?
Where do you think the future is going to look like with these numbers?
Well, I think as science builds on what it already has, evidence, more truth, more logic, I guess what I would say, it comes into play, and it becomes more and more apparent of what is true and what is not, because that's the human condition, is to try to build on what it already has, and we're just going to keep doing that. Technology is going to keep getting better, and religion's not getting better, so it's going like this. Like, you see medicine and technology getting better because of science. You see religion getting worse and staying the same because of religion. So you see the results, and one's going up, one's going down. That those results are going to reflect by the population. It's really simple.
I'm very grateful. This is my friend Jado from Clubhouse. By the way, Neal, do you go into Clubhouse?
What's that?
It's an application that is sort of the old Pal Talk conversation over the phone, where you have rooms and you create a room, and you have a topic. It's been happening for the past year or so. So Jado is a friend of mine from that particular club. You can actually create a Gnostic Informant club. Nice. And you can actually grab a new YouTube audience from, because this is a different area altogether. I'll tell you all about it offline. It's interesting. It's a strange world out there. That's so many people. There are people apparently that don't use YouTube that much, or don't know about it that much, or that don't think YouTube is used for conversation like yours. By the way, guys, in the description of this video is Gnostic Informant. Neal's channel called Gnostic Informant. The description is in there. Please check out the conversations he's having with marvelous people like Dr. Robert Price. Maybe tell us about some of the names you host regularly, Neal.
Yeah, Dr. Robert Price that I had on today. That was a really good conversation. Just like this was a great conversation too. Two great conversations back to back today. I loved it. Was a great day. But yeah, I just had him on, and then M. David Letwa, great scholar. Bart Ehrman's on there. Digital Hammurabi, Derek Lambert. I mean, there's just tons of great guests on there. Check it out. Gnostic Informant. Look it up on YouTube. It pops right up. It's the first thing that comes up when you type in Gnostic Informant.
One of the things I like about your channel and Derek's, and I've said that before, it's you guys have obviously you're good friends, but the conversation style that you bring to your lecture. So these are PhD academics, but the way you sort of engage with them in a dialogue and a question, bring that sort of information that if I think if they appear on their own, it might be too complex for people. And the line of questions you provide and the dialogue you provide brings that sort of maybe complicated ideas down to earth. So regular people can understand complex ideas, and you direct the conversation in a way that is both informative and entertaining, which is, I find, very interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I think you're in the same boat too. I think you're doing the same thing. So
thank you very much, Neal. Is there anything you like to end with before we end the show?
I would just say, man, just keep this show. Just keep doing what you're doing. This is this dialogue. This is what we need. This is what needs to happen. People need to just keep talking about it and listen. And yeah, I love it. I love your space that you started here. This is great.
Thank you very much, Neal. Okay, folks, tomorrow we got Richard Carrier, by the way. So we're going to talk about the Kalam cosmological argument. It's been debunked now by.
Richard Carey's been everywhere lately. I've seen him on like a lot of different shows lately. That's cool.
I think he was with Derek a few hours ago.
I think so. I think he might.
Yeah.
Be right.
Yeah, I think he was on Derek's a couple of hours ago.
He's actually coming on my channel on March 1st.
There you go. He's a busy man. I think this is the world we live in at the moment. These are lectures that usually before the pandemic they would to go to sort of venues, and this is their livelihood right now. And you got to tell the audience here that these are academics that we usually have to compensate. Gnostic Informant, Derek, myself, we pay for their time, so to bring them to you guys, and we do appreciate the super chats that you provide to Neal, myself, and Derek, because that will contribute towards some of the fees. But this is how people making their livelihood these days, and in the virtual world, because the physical world has been kind of difficult to attend for quite some time. Hopefully that will change very soon, and the world will come back to normal. But I think one thing that will never change is this new method of information. People can sit back, chill with a drink, and watch a show like this without having to, take an Uber or a taxi to a certain venue. So it's fantastic. Yeah. Thank you so much, Derek. I would like to thank everybody who watched us tonight, and we will see you tomorrow on the Kalam Cosmological Arguments with Dr. Richard Carrier.